All right, we are live. This will be interesting. I got two different live streams going tonight. We're doing Instagram and YouTube tonight. So this is the first time on YouTube, and thanks you guys for stopping by. I am going to have a guest on here tonight. Kyle Sorensen's coming on, and he will be joining me shortly. You'll be able to hear him on YouTube on audio only, but on Instagram here, you guys will be able to see him just fine. We're going to be talking about some swim bait stuff tonight. We're going to be talking ice fishing coming up. Also going to be announcing a giveaway here. So thanks for joining, guys. Just getting the Instagram going. There we go. Perfect. So yeah, like I said, Kyle Sorensen's coming on tonight with me here shortly, and you guys on YouTube, you'll be able to see him. Well, actually, you won't be able to see him. You'll be able to hear him. Instagram, if you guys want to switch over to Instagram, you certainly can, and we can join there, and then you'll be able to see my guest as well. But we're going to be talking, like I said, swim baits. I've got some swim bait hacks tonight to go over, and then I've also got a giveaway to announce and some other stuff to go over as well. Some ice fishing stuff. So thanks for hopping on, guys. Good to see some people hopping on YouTube. That's cool. You guys are on the very first live here at Hooked Up, Wisconsin. So hopefully this will be good for you. There's Kyle. He's just hopping on now. Tell me how you guys have been doing fishing, duck hunting. Looking to hear how you guys are doing as well. So I think you guys on YouTube can chat. So hey, yep, we got one person saying hi on YouTube already. That's awesome. Yeah, and any of you guys on YouTube who've joined through shorts lately, that's super cool. I've been putting up a lot of shorts on YouTube, and lots of people have been kind of finding the channel that way. So it's been awesome to see in the last couple of weeks here. So, Kyle, are you gonna join? I think I'm waiting for requests from Kyle right now. There we go. There he is. Get Kyle on here. See how the fishing's been over his way. See what he's been up to. I'm sure it's been good. He's a heck of a fisherman. Hey, Kyle, how's it going?
Things are good.
Good. I'm going to turn you up here a little bit. There we go. Hopefully, we're live on YouTube tonight, too. They won't be able to see you, but they'll be able to hear you just fine. So,
Perfect.
Yeah. So, what have you been up to lately? You been out muskie fishing some?
Yeah, we caught one tonight on a sucker, so that just kind of kicked off. Water temps are finally down low enough to where I'm dragging some meat around.
Yep, I figured it'd be about that time.
I like this time of year where you can cast and drag bait. So.
Yeah, it's awesome because you got both the best of both worlds right now. You got fish coming to the boat following your faster lures, and then you've got those triggering live baits set out.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's just fun. There's so many fish shallow right now, and it's been pretty good.
Have you been seeing a lot of fish every time out?
Yeah, we saw 10 tonight. I lost one. I bent a treble hook out, which was really weird. I can't believe I did. It wasn't even a very big fish, but I bent the hook out.
Really?
Yeah, I've got a picture of it somewhere. I'll send it to you after this. But
okay.
Yeah, like that, and then we caught the one. I don't know if we had another bite, but we saw 10, I think. So.
Okay, well that's a heck of a night. Andy Shooty is wondering what water temps you're seeing.
Tonight it was 59.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
59 degrees already. Okay, they've really dropped then.
It's been pretty much like 10 degrees in the last 6 days that it's dropped surface temp. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's a pretty impressive drop because last time I was out last weekend, it was still like 64, 63, 64. So that'll trigger some major movement of all species.
Yeah, we saw, I actually almost pulled out my walleye gear. I had walleye rods in the rod locker and came through a big school of walleyes right on like the tip of a point, right where they should be. And I actually saw them moving around on live scope, and it took a lot to not start casting at them. But
I wouldn't have been able to withstand the temptation. I know that. But it's awesome this time of year. You just start to see all those fish start to move back on the really classic structure, which is my favorite way of fishing is when they're concentrated on structure again. You know, they're coming back out of that basin where it's just been a struggle to find them sometimes, and they tend to get a lot more aggressive too.
Yeah, definitely. As far as in Wisconsin, in my opinion, this is the best time. It's late September to catch a muskie casting.
Yep. You're not the only one. We got a couple of comments on the YouTube stream here. Derek says, I know you like fishing the Brule River for trout. I'm going to some streams south of Park Falls tomorrow. Any tips? So Park Falls, he's going to be fishing inland, it sounds like. And inland trout, Derek, this time of year, they're going to be starting to think about spawning. So you're probably going to see some movement towards the upper parts of the river or stream you're fishing by bigger fish. So from now until the end of the season, more and more big fish are going to be moving up into those shallower gravelly sections because that's where they're going to end up spawning. And you can see some absolute giants in very, very small creeks this time of year as they move up because they migrate just like the lake fish do to, you know, those big browns and stuff. They'll come out of those big holes down in the lower stretches and they'll move up way up these streams. And you got to be careful because they're really spooky a lot of times, especially if you haven't had much rain, the water's really clear. They can be hard to catch because they're, you know, they can see you really well. But it can be a great time of year to catch a big giant way up there.
Those spawning colors if you're catching browns.
Yeah, if you guys have seen any of my my latest like shorts or anything like that, you've seen a couple of those browns. I just caught a couple the other day, and they were just as nice as they. So let me know if that's which pond that is. That could be Lake Michigan or it could be Lake Superior. Sounds like Lake Superior if you're catching all those in the same area. More than likely, but that's cool. Lost Me Lure says, yep, I've seen some real big ones in 10 feet wide creeks. Yes, even smaller. I've seen some 20 plus inch browns in this time of year in streams I could jump across. So, but they are hard to catch. Kyle's using 20-inch baits this time of year instead of catching 20-inch fish. What's your favorite bait to throw this time of year, Kyle, and when you're casting for muskies?
Well, it's been a bite on a dive and rise, Kodiak Navin, which is like a suic, but instead of wood, it's a composite. Actually, okay. They might be wood. But I like dive and rises, pull pause type lures, whether it's a rubber bait, just that pull pause is good.
Mm-hmm. And are you snapping the rod at all, or is it kind of a slow pull?
I kind of mix it up. As I get tired, I can sometimes get kind of lazy, but I did have a fish try to eat. I made like a 6-7 foot, like basically pulled it as long of a fast pull as I could, and it triggered a bite. He missed it, and it was a small one, but I'll snap real hard, easy pull, and then once I get like 10 feet out from the boat where I want to trigger another bite, I'll snap it real hard.
Okay.
And usually they'll trigger on the hard snaps if there is one there, which
most of the time there isn't. But yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've thrown big rubber baits a little bit, and I've just never felt confident in the retrieve I was doing. You know, I've just never dialed it in enough to understand what that thing's supposed to be doing. So I tend to throw them for a little while and then go back to something I know a little bit better. But I should probably stick with them a little bit more.
Yeah, I've seen people catch fish on a Medusa or Bulldog just straight retrieving it too. I mean, there's no one way to do it that's the only way, but it seems like snapping them, especially if you're around weeds, is the key.
Right, it does. That makes sense. I mean, that's the triggering move, just like speeding up a bucktail at the end of the retrieve or anything like that. Something erratic or a change in speed is usually what does the trick.
Yep.
I'm going to go over a couple of swim bait tips right now, real quick, because I've been fishing swim baits quite a bit the last few weeks, and it just gets better and better this time of year. And I like to throw pretty big ones. And I've learned a few things throwing these big swim baits, but this one in particular I really like. This is the Berkeley Hollow Belly. I've tried a few different hollow bellies. I've tried the Strike Kings, and some of the other ones, and these ones are just tougher. They've got a little bit tougher rubber on them, it seems like, and they don't get beat up quite as fast. They've got a little bit more plastic in the front end. Because what happens with these, they got a really good action, but they tend to get chewed up really fast, and they're not cheap. So these Berkeley hollow bellies are pretty reasonable too. But I like the bluegill colors because I've been fishing weed lines, and basically what happens in the fall is those weeds that are all standing up, they start to die and they start to fall down and they start to drop. And it'll, number one, it concentrates the bluegills and the bait fish on the best weeds that are left. And number two, a lot of the schools get pushed out of the weeds completely, and now they're exposed, and those predators are just waiting to smash them. So I like bluegill colors because that's kind of what they're used to hitting. And then I like to go with a bigger bait than what the bait is. So if you're seeing like 2-3 inch bluegills, which is oftentimes what you see this time of year, just big hordes of them, I like to go with something bigger because it stands out. You know, those fish are looking at 1,000 little tiny bluegills, and you get one that's 3 inches longer or 2 or 3 inches longer than what they're looking at. That'll trigger them because that's a big meal. They know they can grab that and get, more energy out of that than chasing all those little ones. So minimum I go with 5 inch, but I'll throw all the way up to 7 inch. And I'm sure, Kyle, you can agree, like you probably are catching bass on 10, 12, 14 inch baits this time of year, right?
Okay, they'll eat them.
Oh yeah, this is not even close to too big. Weldon Hershey said, pike and bass love those. Yeah, muskie will eat these too. But here's one of the tips that I just filmed for you guys are going to get a preview of it, but I just filmed it this afternoon for virtual angling, the new app that's out there. I don't know if any of you guys have seen that, but I've got some content on there. Jason Mitchell and Nicole Stone are working together on that app. It's a pretty awesome app. But anyway, you guys get to see it first. So I like to fish these deep, right? But if you're fishing deep weeds, the problem is you can get a nice heavy jig head, like a 3/4 ounce, 1 ounce jig head, but that's going to snag weeds all day long, right? You can only fish the edges. So if you get one of these weighted swim bait hooks, it'll go through weeds great, but it's not going to get down to that 10 to 15 feet of water, right? It's never going to go down that far. You might get 4 feet out of it. So what I do is when I'm fishing deep weeds, I slide a worm weight on ahead of it. And you can go, this is a 1/4 ounce. So I got a 1/4 ounce here, 1/4 ounce here, and all of a sudden I've got a 1/2 ounce, right? And you can go all the way up to 3/4 of an ounce here, put a tungsten weight on there, and now you've got an ounce of weight on a weedless bait that's going to get down all the way to the bottom of that weed line. And, some of our lakes are so clear, they've got weed lines that end in 20 feet of water. you know. So this is a perfect way to get down there and not be hauling weeds back every single time. I've been using this all fall, and I'm almost switching to this more than the jig because it's just so much more efficient. You know, half your casts on that jig, you end up hauling weeds back, and that's been working good for me. And those hollow bellies are perfect for that because they've got that nice squishy inside, you know, so they squish real easy, and that hook set's not so hard. But you do have to fish heavier tackle on those. I mean, I'm fishing, 7-foot bait casters, 7-foot heavy jig rods, basically, is what I'm fishing. So, but that works really well. You ever tried that, Kyle, with these?
Yeah, like, but typically I'm fishing them for muskies.
Yep.
But I guess one thing I'm kind of curious, will you fish those around pretty much anything? Will you fish them in milfoil?
That's where I have been fishing them. Yeah, I've been fishing them in milfoil. That's where I've been fishing them the last couple of weeks, actually. Yep. And there's a lot of fish in milfoil right now. I mean, it's because that's where I'm seeing those schools of little bluegills is around milfoil. Like this time of year when the milfoil's all up, if you get in a good bed of it, it's like almost to the surface, and it looks almost like a hard structure. It's so thick. And then all of a sudden it'll just drop straight off the edge and into 10, 12 feet of water. It's like a hard line. That's where those big schools of baby bluegills have been setting up, and everything's there eating them right now. Real Tone, are you targeting mainly bass and pike? Yes, mainly bass and pike, although at some point the walleyes are going to move up there, and it depends on the lake you're on, depends on the area you're in. In my opinion, that doesn't happen usually here where those walleyes actually move all the way up to that weed line until about when the water hits about 40, 48, 45 to 48 degrees, somewhere in there. You'll see a few pushing up shallow, especially towards the evenings this time of year. But like the full blown day bite where you catch them all day long on weed lines with the bass and pike, I would say that's probably not going to happen till more like that, November, early November, late October-ish time period. Would you agree, Kyle? What's that?
Most people quit before it gets good.
Exactly. Yeah.
Most people are thinking about deer hunting and stuff like that by the time that the walleye fishing, especially with bigger baits and sucker minnows, the 4-inch sucker minnows and stuff like that, like cold fall bite.
Yes, exactly. Captain Dominic Sanchez says I'm red fishing in the morning. That's awesome. I'd rather be red fishing. But
down in Corpus Christi area.
Okay.
He's got a pretty cool deal down there, duck hunting and catching reds and speckled trout.
Oh, so he's a buddy of yours then.
Yeah, I know who he is.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a good. I'm glad you brought that up because where I do my red fishing is now absolutely destroyed. I mean, it's really sad, really sad. I've been watching this whole storm, this whole hurricane come through like a hawk because Sanibel is like my second home, and Sanibel is basically completely destroyed. I mean, it's devastating. Like the causeway is gone in like 4 or 5 places. It's just completely gone. Like the Causeway Islands just washed out completely. It's just the whole island got flooded out. All the buildings, every single building on that island basically is damaged. It's just crazy stuff. But anyway, it'll come back. It's going to take years. It may never be quite the same as what it was, but they're resilient down there and they're built for hurricanes. So, but that one was the biggest. I mean, I think as far as I know, that's the biggest hurricane that they've ever had hit there in history that we know of. I mean, it was bad, way worse than Charlie was back in 2004. And they don't even know much about it yet. I mean, like they know there's 2 casualties on Sanibel, so far that they found, but they've only been on there for half a day, and they didn't even get very far into the island. So yeah, it may be a couple. I doubt I'll be back there at least for another year, maybe more. It's going to take them a long time to build back the infrastructure down there. It's pretty sad. And my cousin lives on Sanibel, which is really unfortunate. We have no idea what his house looks like yet, but he's luckily he is off the island. But their only means of getting on and off the island is gone. I mean, it's going to take a long time to rebuild that bridge and that causeway. So pretty rough down there. Can be glad we don't have hurricanes up here, because I mean it can ruin your entire. It can just take away everything you have so fast. It's crazy. But
I never even thought until you mentioned it, but Coco Pike is down there.
He's down there too. I actually messaged him the day before, the day of the hurricane, like that morning, and I never heard from him. I don't know where he's at, but I mean, he was right in the middle of it. What's that?
You never heard from him?
Nope, never heard back. He never texted me back, so I don't know how he fared. But yeah, I thought of him right away too, because he just moved there.
Yeah. And
he was on a canal in what I think he was by Burnt Store or Punta Gorda, maybe. No, he was in Cape Coral. He's in Cape Coral, and Cape Coral got demolished. I mean, Cape Coral's toast. It's bad. Like 8 feet of storm surge. Like every canal every building was flooded out to the first floor in Cape Coral. I mean, it was bad. I mean, he might be in rough shape down there. It could be.
How much heads up do people get for this kind of stuff? Like, do you just gotta wait, or can you move any of your stuff out?
No, not really. I mean, you can. Like this one, they didn't have enough warning because the whole track of the storm was supposed to hit Tampa the whole time until about 18 hours before landfall, and then the hurricane just turned east and just took a hard right, and they just didn't have enough time. You could load up a car and get one load off the island, and that's it. I mean, you're leaving everything behind. And some people didn't leave, and unfortunately for a few of them, that was a big mistake.
Right.
But pretty unreal. So anyway, we got a couple questions I'm going to answer here. But yes, they said that was Lake Superior, South Shore, where they were catching the trout, walleyes, and salmon. That's a good day. Yeah, we all have the same stash. We must be fishermen. Yeah, there's something about a mustache in fishing that just seems to work. Don't you agree, Kyle? Let's see here. Had an interesting conversation about the hurricane today. With how serious this one is, do you think those storm systems will have an effect on winter? We're far enough from the ground zero there. Like you see today, I mean, our weather's gorgeous here. I don't see those systems having any effect on our winter. They already had a huge effect there. I mean, in Florida, the temperature the rest of the fall is now going to be fall because that hurricane turns over the ocean. They had 89-degree surface temp when that hurricane came in. You know what it is today? 74. So it churned up the ocean so much that it just was a big mixer basically, and cooled the ocean temperature down to basically almost winter temperatures. And it'll keep it'll keep the Gulf counties cool the rest of the season now, which is pretty insane. Pretty crazy stuff. I mean, that thing was a monster. Absolute monster. But anyway, enough about Florida. I know you guys probably didn't come here to hear me go on, but it is such a big part of my life. I mean, I've been going there for 15 years to that island and catching redfish and snook and all kinds of stuff offshore, and it may not happen for a while. it might be a couple years before we end up back there. But here's another quick tip for you that I also shared on virtual angling. So this is another way I rig a swim bait. Really common, just on a jig head. Super basic, just like you'd rig any soft plastic on a jig head. This is a clam tungsten TG drop jig. These are awesome swim bait jigs, by the way. They've got a really nice keeper on them. That tungsten gets that bait down there really nice. And the one key to them is they've got a long hook shank on them, so you get that hook back far enough. You always want your hook at least halfway, right around that halfway point back on a swim bait. You don't want to have a short shank, but you also don't want that shank coming back too far in the tail or you lose action. So that's just perfect for like a 4-inch swim bait right there. And what I do with these swim baits to get a little bit more life out of them is before I push them up on the head of the jig here, I put a couple good drops of super glue gel on there. If you use regular super glue, it'll drip off too much, but the super glue gel tends to stay on there a little better. And then I'm just going to push that right up over the super glue, and it'll just seal around that head and let it. You just have to let it dry for about a couple minutes, and that thing is going to be on there for a long time, basically until you tear it off. So, with pike, sometimes they end up biting the tail off, but oftentimes they just end up chewing up the body of the bait and they rip this head out. But if you super glue it on there, it's going to last a lot longer. And this is a Storm Largo shad, by the way. I don't know if you guys can see that on YouTube there too, but this is one of the most realistic bluegill swim baits that I've seen. I mean, look at that thing. It's got some super nice detail on it, and I've caught quite a few fish on it already. Not sponsored or anything. I just really like that bait. It just catches fish, looks very fishy, got a good thump to it. So that's one of the other ones I've been using lately.
I found, since you mentioned glue, have you found something that you can use to glue? I don't know if you use them. The Z-Man Elastics. You know how glue melts it?
Yep.
Have you found something that doesn't melt it?
Nope, I have not. The Elastec is made out of a completely different plastisol than regular plastics, as you know. And if you put it with a regular plastisol bait, it'll just turn into a gooey mess. And the same thing happens when you put super glue on it. And I would assume the same would happen if you put any kind of solvent on it. It just doesn't hold up to solvents like the regular plastisol. So yeah, I don't have any tricks for that. That type of plastic, if you got a good keeper, it does hold it really well, because it's almost got like strands of fiber in it almost that snag on that keeper, and they don't come off very easy anyway. They're just so tough, like I don't necessarily need it as much on when I'm using that type of a plastic, but they do work really well for certain applications, those Z-Man plastics. So like your Ned rigs and stuff like that. I mean, that's the OG Ned rig bait, but I don't use them a ton, that partly because I work with Eurotackle, and they kind of ripped off the Eurotackle micro finesse line, and I'm not super thrilled about that. So
oh yeah, they made like a slingshot or something.
Yeah, they made a whole line of micro finesse baits, and like micro finesse was the term that Eurotackle basically came up with, and they stole it. They stole the color, even that light green. I mean, they basically completely ripped it off. Like, it was hardcore, and I believe they may be in litigation for that actually at some point. But yeah, it was pretty blatant. So I've kind of lost my enthusiasm for Z-Man. It's a common thing in the fishing industry, though. I mean, it's like you see it everywhere. I'm sure you've seen it in musky fishing too. Like, once a bait's out there, everyone's going to copy it. It's just a matter of time, like it's just going to happen. And it's just unfortunate kind of that there's no way to protect designs really in the fishing industry like there is in some other ones. It just seems like all you have to do is tweak one little thing and all of a sudden you've got your own new bait, and it's tough. It's tough as a bait company out there. Yeah, it's a brutal industry for sure. What are you doing there? Are you putting fletching on arrows or what?
Yeah, I'm fletching arrows because I keep breaking all my arrows.
Okay. What, are you missing the targets or what?
I shot at a target that was 178 yards away.
Oh.
And missed my long shot. Broken up the arrow.
Oh, maybe that's why I don't go over 100 when I'm practicing. Did you you went on a speed goat hunt, didn't you?
Yeah, I shot a nice goat and I shot a doe mule deer. So
Cool.
I had a good hunt in South Dakota.
Yeah, that sounds like a blast. My dad's leaving for Wyoming. Actually, he left today. He's going out there for their opener mule deer season, gun season, which is I think on Saturday. It's always on the first, actually. So that would be Sunday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, Saturday. Yeah, it opens Saturday. So hopefully he gets a big old muley.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hopefully they're cool weather that we are too.
Yeah, I've been out there that week when it is nasty hot. Like, I think that one year we had 92 degrees on the first week of October out there, and that was just brutal. But the crazy thing was the weather can change so fast out there. Like that same trip, it was snowing the day we left. 6 days later, it went from 92 to snowing. Insane.
That's the one fault with that antelope hunt because it opens like August 20th or something.
Mm-hmm.
In late August is, especially sitting in a ground blind, is like a sauna.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine.
That's the one thing that could change, but
yeah, I can imagine. Victor Aho 13 got any merch? I do not have any merch as of yet, but I am I'm considering that as the ice season approaches. You know, I'd like to get a few things kind of figured out for that because you're not the first person to ask, and you know, I just don't consider myself worthy of having my own merch yet, I guess. But if you guys want it, you know, I'll see what I can do. That'd be awesome. I mean, I'm flattered that you're asking. That's pretty cool. Speaking of ice season, if you guys can see, I don't know, I'm pretty proud of this right here. See that? That just happened this week. So I got on the Vexilar Pro staff and the Cadro Pro staff team this year, late in the game, but luckily they were generous and allowed me to join the team. So that is going to be pretty awesome. I mean, Vexilar has been just one of my favorite outdoor industry companies for years, and I never thought I would get on their team. It's a tough one to get on, but I'm pretty honored that they wanted to have me join up with them and do some work with them, and definitely be promoting the Vexilars this year. So that's pretty cool. And K-Drill, you know, K-Drill is an awesome company too, and I'm going to do some pretty cool stuff with them as well. So I think it's going to be a fun ice season. I'm with Clam, K-Drill, Vexilar, Euro Tackle, Blackfish. You know, it's going to be a hardcore ice season. So I'm excited.
it's really cool to be working with Vexilar. Congrats, dude.
Yeah, thanks.
That's really neat. I don't know of anybody that didn't start ice fishing with an FL8.
Nope. It's pretty much a piece of ice fishing history, just kind of like the Clam flip over is, you know, it was the OG flasher that everybody had, you know. Like I remember going out on the ice as a kid. First time I ever saw him, my dad's buddy Ted had one, and I mean, it was immediately incredible to us. Like we had been fishing crappies in the basin only because we knew they were there. like from years of experience of our grandparents had fished them there. We learned to fish them there. My dad learned to fish them there in that same basin. And all we used to do was we'd put lanterns on the ice, and we would actually drop. We had like the front end of rods, so we had like 3-foot rods with Dacron line, like tip up line, and we'd unspool the tip up line, and we'd set the bobber to be like 5 feet off the bottom with a crappie minnow, and then we would just watch. We'd put 3 bobbers out per person, and we had no idea if there was fish there or not, but we kind of knew, but you couldn't see them because we didn't have flashers. So, and then we would just watch the bobbers, and you'd check your minnow once in a while, and then when we got a bite, we would set the hook with that rod, and then we would hand line the crappie up, and then we wouldn't have to change our depth or anything. We would just hand line it back down with a new minnow on it, and we caught fish that way. But then this guy shows up with a Vexlar, and we're like, tell me, is that a fish? Are you telling me that's a fish right there? He's like, yeah, watch this. And he starts bringing his lure up, and the fish comes after it, and we're like, no way. Because it was a game changer. I mean, it's so crazy to us. And, a couple years later, my dad finally got one, and we just learned so much so fast then with just a flasher,
I don't know if I could ice fish without that, that lifting and making them chase it.
Yeah.
For me, that's what it's all about. If you took that away, I don't know if I'd go anymore.
It'd be a totally different thing. Like, I would give me a chisel and a Vexlar. I'll give you my auger if I can keep my Vexlar. Like, seriously. I mean, because I can take that Vexlar, I can pour water on the ice to find the exact depth I want to be at, because I can shoot through the ice with it. I'll chop a hole, and then I'll just fish that. You have my auger, I'll keep my flasher. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And a lot of people thought that was going to be the complete death of the fishery. I mean, they thought flashers were going to kill every fish in the lake. They thought that was the end of it. Just like kind of you hear that from people now about forward-facing sonar, and you can see why. I mean, it was a huge invention that changed how we fish and changed the way that we fish and look for fish. But, the fishery was able to absorb that for the most part. And
conscious, as long as you manage the people that are greedy with multiple limits,
mm-hmm.
If people abide by the limits and harvest responsibly, these technologies make it so much more fun.
Oh, yeah.
But they definitely, it speeds up the learning curve a lot, It really does.
Yeah, that was what we really found out. We had no idea what we were looking at before, and we were all of a sudden able to see it all. You could see the weeds, you could see the places that didn't have weeds, you could see the places that had bait fish and bluegills. Instantly you knew if there was fish there, and you learned on a 10x level compared to the old lead weight dropping down each hole trying to figure out how deep you were. And the same thing with forward-facing sonar. I mean, like you said, you just have to regulate. You have to adjust the regulations, which I don't see has happened yet. In the last 10 years, there's been very little restriction on the fish limits in our area to kind of keep up with that technology. But hopefully it's coming. They have been doing a little bit, like there's a few lakes they've dropped to a 10 panfish limit or a 5.55, some of that's going on, but a lot of them have stayed the same. Chris Hagness says all you need is an FL8, and he is correct. All you need is an FL8. Although it is pretty dang spiffy to have an FL X30, I will say. That thing can do a lot more than an FL8. However, I'd be catching fish with an FL8 too. It is a great unit. The FLX30 I used the whole season last year, and that was pretty amazing. And I didn't use it enough to get it really dialed. This year I'm hoping to use it more, but it's so advanced as far as how you can tune it to read through weeds, to separate fish from bottom, to fish deep water, to fish super shallow water. It literally can be basically dialed into any situation you would ever find ice fishing, to be basically as good as it can be for that situation. But you have to know how to set it. That's the trick. You have to know where to put your settings to make it work for you. Just like any complicated electronics, you have to know what you're doing. And I'm still learning, but I was able to dial it in a few bites that was pretty incredible. So the key, yeah, go ahead.
The zoom feature to me is probably the biggest thing, right?
That's one of them.
Wait, you're fishing like lake trout or something. How much can you zoom in, or do you zoom on like a certain amount of water?
Yep, there's I believe 3 zooms on the FLX30. There's a 6-foot zoom like you have on a lot of the other ones. There's a 12-foot zoom and there's an 18-foot zoom, and that's from bottom. So the lake trout fishing, that 18-foot zoom is pretty useful, because oftentimes you're dealing with fish that are cruising 10, 12 feet off the bottom, and you can still see on the other side. You can still see the full water column too, but it makes your separation much clearer from on that zoom level from bottom, especially like if you got a fish right on bottom. If you don't have it on zoom in 80, 90 feet of water, you may not make out that fish from bottom, but you put that zoom on there, all of a sudden it really pops. And same with seeing fish hit your bait. It's like when it's really small, it's hard to tell exactly when that mark catches up, but if you have it on zoom, you can see it. The only problem with the zoom is like with lake trout, they'll chase it all the way to the ice sometimes, and then you have a problem because they disappear after they go above 18 feet, and then you're kind of stuck to that little tiny screen. But
on the zoom, you like freak out because you can't see them.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do I do now?
Yeah. Just do what you were doing and hope it works. Oh, yeah, that's true. But no, that's one of the features. The craziest thing about the 30 BB, the BB stands for Broadband Transducer, and the broadband means you can switch the cone angle 7 different angles. So it's starting at super wide and then ticking in narrower and narrower all the way until you're at like, I think it's 6 degree cone, which is super tight. So if you're fishing like Lake Superior, for instance, like you're talking, you can use that super narrow cone angle on high power, and you can see clearly a long ways down without widening that cone out so far that you get muddy. Because I'm sure you've fished a couple 100 feet of water out there, and if your cone angle's wide, you see fish 30 feet away that's coming in. You don't know how close it is to your bait, but when you can narrow that cone up and focus it, it can shoot through a lot deeper water more clearly.
Bottom, you got the gray area is so much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, especially in deep water on Lake Superior, it might fluctuate depth 30 feet in a few 10 yards or so.
Yep, and that's where it really comes in handy too, because you don't see that. When you're going up a hill, the wider your cone angle goes out, the less you can see of that slope. So the narrower cone really helps on those steeper drop-offs like that too.
Right?
What's that?
It's a more true reading.
Yep, exactly. It's a more focused, true reading. And sometimes, like when I'm fishing shallower on Lake Superior and there's a big current, I'll turn it all the way out so it's a super wide cone angle, because my bait might be way over here, but I can still see it in the cone then. You know, you can just with a push of a button, you can change it and dial it in to exactly where you can see the best, which is really slick. The same applies for shallow. You can set it on low power and a wide cone angle, and you can see fish even in heavy weeds because it filters those weeds out on low power, and you still have a cone angle, a decent cone, even though you're right below the hole. It's shooting out so far that you don't have to be right in the middle of your hole to see your bait or the fish that are coming in. So you can dial it in the opposite way too for super shallow bite, which is really really useful. I mean, it's the you can't tune any other flasher even close to that kind of tuning. And like I said, I'm still getting used to it and kind of learning it, but it's gonna be pretty cool. Rick Fratz just joined on YouTube. Thanks, Rick, for stopping by. We're just talking fishing like we usually do. Talking a little ice fishing, getting ready for that. It's not gonna be too far off here. I mean, we could be walking on ice in basically 60 days. Heck, 50 days.
Yeah, I bet I'm not as excited as you are.
I bet you're not.
But I know it is cool though, especially first ice when things are really good, especially walleye wise.
Mm-hmm.
It's early ice thing.
Yeah, last season, I don't know how your early ice season was last year, but ours was terrible. I mean, it was one of the worst early ice seasons I've ever had, and I don't know exactly why. I have some theories, but it was rough going.
Yeah. Because I did a lot of late season deer hunting, but yeah, it was great. I know the ice conditions weren't that great early on either.
No, it froze over a lot of places, but it snowed. Well, when we had the clear ice, I couldn't catch anything. I think it was just spooking the fish too much. We had 3 inches of just clear ice, and you'd move around and there would just be nothing there. And then it snowed, and all of a sudden we just started catching fish like crazy as soon as that snow hit. So I think we were just spooking fish, I think, by walking on that super thin ice above them, and they were moving out of our way. But once the snow hit, then the ice got kind of crappy. Yeah, like you're saying, it was sketchy for a while there because I think we got like 8 inches of snow on top of 3 inches of ice, and that never does it any favors. But that's when that float suit really makes it doable. What's that?
I really like being able to see the ice and know when I'm walking on it and be able to look at it. Whereas once it snows, I'm so apprehensive.
Yeah, and you should be. I mean, everybody should be, because it's scary enough when you're on 3 inches of ice and you can see if there's a weird spot. Like we were on one lake last year before it snowed where you could be on 4 inches of ice and there was holes, the size of, I don't know, like 3 feet across that were half an inch of ice, just like popping up in that 4 inch. But you could see them when there was no snow. You could tell they were there and walk around them. But once it snowed, you'd be going in. You'd be going for a swim. Chris Hagnes says live scope to locate, but Vexilar real time is far superior to fish the fish. I would agree with that. There is absolutely nothing that's going to get you instant readout like a flasher. There's just no technology that can do that. And sometimes when it comes down to it, like bluegill, panfish, that type of fishing, when you're watching that flasher, you need to know down to the millisecond when that fish reaches your bait, because sometimes you're just setting on sometimes I don't feel the hit. I just set because I watched a flasher long enough that I know when that fish is going to bite just by watching the flasher when they're biting super light. And if you don't have that instant readout, you're never going to get that. It's never going to happen because you're going to be a half a second behind. and you're going to miss fish. Do you agree with that, Kyle?
Yeah, and I totally, but I've noticed, I went from the LBS 32 to the LBS 34, which is like the Live Scope Plus.
Mm-hmm.
But that's worse. So,
really? Interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely clearer and it's nice, but there's more of the lag.
Interesting.
And that is a serious issue. If you're trying to time, that fish coinciding with your bait, you're going to miss a lot of them if you're doing it with live scope.
Yep.
But it is fun for searching wise.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's really cool. Like when I was out in the boat with you earlier this spring, and you're like telling me, oh, there's a walleye 30 feet that way, and there's one that way. Even though we were shallow and in weeds, you could still see the fish. I mean, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got the original Panoptix ice bundle, and that one still, you can still find suspended fish with it. And I've been finding more application for using it on the down shooting version. So there's forward and then there's down. And I tell you what, when you're fishing basin crappies like I did last year, the combination of that Panoptix and the Vexilar flasher was pretty cool, because I could see on my Panoptix, I could see the school of fish. I could see the individual fish down there, and they would kind of fade in and fade out. And you could kind of tell where they were stacking up. And then I would drop my, see it go down on the Panoptix, and I could see towards it, and it would look like they were on my bait, but I could look at my flasher and I knew they weren't, because as soon as I saw them on the flasher, I knew that they were within inches of my bait because I had it set on a narrow cone. So I was watching both. I was watching those fish mill around, and then I could see a fish off to the side, and I could know where that highest fish was in the school to keep my bait above it. And then I'd see it move in on the Panoptix, and then I'd switch to my flasher, and about 3 seconds later, boom, there it would show up on the flasher, and I would pull it up and catch it. I mean, it was pretty cool. I definitely want to try that more this year, because it was a deadly combination.
Yeah, 1-2.
Yep, exactly. What items or strategy do you have in case you fall through the ice? That is a good question. I'll let you answer that one first, Kyle. What is your game plan for a cold, like the polar plunge?
I wear a float suit. I have a clam one. I know there's other brands that are good too, but I use clam. I have fallen through with it. I've fallen through quite a few times. I've also fallen through in striker suits. They seem to work fine too. But number one is float suit. Number two, if ice is sketchy, is to walk with a spud bar.
Mm-hmm.
And I carry ice picks too. But every time that I've fallen through the ice, I haven't used my ice picks. I've just gotten myself out. I'm young and in pretty good shape. That's not as big of a deal, but I can see why other people might want ice picks. I recommend carrying them. But for me, it's spud bar and a float suit.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. You never know.
No, you don't. And I'm pretty much in the same boat. Like, the spud bar is your key to not falling in. That's what's going to keep you from going in. Like, if you're spudding ahead, checking the ice every step, I've saved myself from falling in. I have never fallen through the ice yet. And it's only because I check every step with a spud bar early ice religiously, because I don't really want to fall in. I have a float suit on, but I'm not that interested in trying it out like Kyle is apparently. I mean, it happened. It can still happen. That's the only thing you have to realize. Like, even though I'm super careful and I have not fallen through the ice, I am prepared to fall through the ice. And that's the key. Always be prepared to fall through the ice, because it is always a possibility. And if you aren't prepared, you're dead. That sucks, right? Like, you have to be ready. Float suit, I wear clam too. Clam's a really good float suit. It's been put to the test many times, and I trust it. I also wear ice picks. I've never fallen through, so I haven't had a chance to try them. But I would suspect with a float suit, your your buoyancy is going to help you swim up onto the ice in most cases, and you're not going to need the ice picks like Kyle was saying. But if you're in the water and you need them and you don't have them, you're going to really wish you had them. So I definitely recommend wearing the ice picks too. And that's kind of my three-pronged strategy. Number one, check ahead with the ice chisel. Number two, if you go through, don't sink. Number three, if you're floating, claw your way out. That's kind of the key, I guess. Yeah, so that's a very good point. Ice safety, always top of mind. Were you putting the live scope and the Vexlar in the same hole? Nope, I had separate holes, just basically maybe a foot apart, foot and a half, something like that. So, and I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I had my Vexlar in the hole I was fishing in, so I could see directly down on my bait, which is what you want to do. And then I had the live scope just off to the side, maybe a foot. And that worked really well. Chris Hagness parked my truck on 20 inches, drilled on 5 inches, 50 yards away a few years back. You never know. Yeah. And driving on the ice is that's a whole other topic, because you can fall through in your truck and your float suit ain't going to do you any good unless you can get out. So I'm driving out on my truck later and later every season, I feel like. Have you ever put a truck through the ice, Kyle, or just you?
No, just me and snowmobiles and four-wheelers. And
okay.
Usually I fall through.
Yeah. I had a scare last winter on the bay. I was crossing a crack, basically an ice heave. You guys who fish big water know what those are. And I was on a trail. It looked good from the day before. I got out, checked the ice, kind of gave it a couple whacks with the chisel, looked good, and I'm on a wheeler. Took off across there, and my back end just went poof, straight down. And I was like, here we go. This is it, But luckily, the back rack caught on the ice and kind of held up the front and the back, kept it from going down. It was about 5 feet till the ice actually buckled underneath there. And I climbed out the front side of the four-wheeler, and we were able to actually pull the wheeler out with two snowmobiles linked together. We got it out of there, and I actually drove it to my fishing spot. But that was super lucky, really. I mean, I was lucky to get out of that one with my wheeler and everything intact. But that one definitely made me think twice about being more thorough when I check those cracks, because those cracks are definitely dangerous. I mean, there's no two ways around it. Those ice heaves are dangerous spots for sure. But that's the closest I've ever been to going through. Windows down, seatbelt off. Yeah, that's kind of the rule. I mean, if I'm even in the middle of winter crossing a lake, I'll usually at least have my seatbelt off and one window down. It's not a bad idea.
Can't hear.
What was that?
You can't hear the ice cracking?
Yeah, turn the radio up. That's the key to safety on the ice, so you can't hear the ice cracking. Rick Fratt said, Humminbird Helix 7 separate transducer or not? I guess I'm not sure what you mean by separate transducer. Oh, for side imaging. I don't know anybody who uses side imaging on the ice. Do you, Kyle? Because you're going to have to be moving to use side imaging properly.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I'm not sure exactly on text.
Yeah, maybe you can elaborate on that, Rick.
Yeah. No, yeah, people use, 360 and through the ice.
Mm-hmm.
That's animal.
Yeah. Have you seen that in person yet? The 360?
Yeah, I've seen boats where guys use it. I've thought about getting it, but I'm just not sure how many gadgets I want to hang off of my boat. You know, at some point there's a limit of how much time you want to spend staring at stuff and not fishing.
Yeah, no, there's a limit to what you can bring with you. That's for sure, and what you can pay attention to.
Use it and enjoy it, and you know, I know a lot of bass fishermen really like it, but being primarily a muskie fisherman, I don't know. It's not something I've done yet, but maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like the live scope is more targeted. Like you're looking for one fish. Live scope is pretty useful because you can really pinpoint it. You can focus on it. You don't need that whole 360 window to watch schools of fish move around so much.
And pretty great. I actually got a nice picture one that we caught tonight on side imaging, and I use that quite a bit, and it tells you a lot about how the fish is relating to like a weed edge, if they're sitting 10 feet off a weed edge, or if they're right in the weeds, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's probably the most useful thing for me.
Yep. That's kind of what I've heard too. And it's kind of crazy that like right mid-season, they pretty much banned any forward-facing sonar from some of the muskie circuits because they assume it's too effective, I guess. And that was an interesting move.
Partly that it's effective, and also that it was enabling people to fish in a way that wasn't really becoming. You know, some people, and I don't know if it was in the PMTT, but I know some people have been kind of caught snagging. And when there's money on the line, I know one of the big things that is a concern as far as muskies is people targeting them too deep.
Yep.
If they're suspended in the summer and they're right on the thermocline and people can see them, you know, with live scope, they might target a fish and pester a fish that normally they wouldn't because there's money on the line. So in a way, it's like, if you can do it, you kind of don't blame them.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a big part of the reason for it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense actually. I mean, it's kind of like having a bass tournament when the smallies are spawning. You know, it's like to win the tournament, you're going to have to target spawning smallmouth. You know, you can't be ethical about it, or you're not going to win because everyone else is going to be doing that. So it's kind of like that. Like if you want to be in the game, you better be chasing Cisco eating fatties in that thermocline if that's where they're at, and that's not great for the fish.
Yeah, and it's not. Sometimes here it wouldn't be a big deal at all.
Yep.
But I know when that kind of all went down, that was the time of year that fish were very vulnerable, water temps were warm, and yeah, it was an interesting decision in the middle of the year. I mean, I agree with it personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the middle of the year, I see why people got pissed too. You know?
Right. Yeah. That's kind of the weird part about it, was that it happened mid-season after some guys had really had some success with it, and that was their game plan to win, you know, the next tournaments. And all of a sudden they had that taken away from them. I can see how that would be pretty sucky for those guys too.
Yeah, but those guys, I remember what they said. They were all excited that they finally did good in one of those tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the only reason that they did good was because of that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, and that's like no one cared when no one was winning tournaments using it. You know, but that's what triggered the whole thing, was that these guys won the tournament, and that's how they caught them. Well, now all of a sudden it's a problem, you know. Whereas,
like anything, it's awareness that some people didn't about it or didn't care or whatever. Like you said, they didn't care.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was actually just talking to Al Lindner the other day. He called me up, and we just chat once in a while, and I asked him about his thoughts on the forward-facing sonar thing, It's just kind of curious what he would say. And he kind of said the same thing. He said, I don't think it's going to be that bad for a lot of fisheries like the walleyes, the bass. He said, I don't think that's going to be a big deal. But he said two things that's going to affect, and that's muskies and crappies. He said the crappies are going to be way easier to find, and they're going to take a hit because everyone keeps them. And then he said the muskies, same kind of thing we're talking about. It's not just that people can see them; it's that they're targeting those offshore fish in the middle of summer that they wouldn't necessarily be able to find before, and they're able to find them and catch them now. And those fish have just super high mortality in the summertime when you're pulling them out of that cold water layer and pulling them up into that warm water layer. So he kind of echoed the same sentiment you had as far as that goes.
Like, when it's just you put a buddy out in the boat, you're a lot more apt to do the right thing. But when you start putting money on the line and a little bit of ego, everybody wants to win. If you're in the PMTT, you're in it to win it.
Yep. You've invested a lot of money in it, at that point.
It's kind of, you never know what certain people would do to win. Some more than others, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And overall, it was probably a good decision to limit it at some point. Because at some point, we have to. Are we just going to let people do anything?
Right. Just because it's there and available.
Yeah. I don't know. We fished without it for a long time and done pretty well.
Yep, exactly. And that's kind of why I've been a little bit slow to jump on the train, just because I'm not sure I want to change that fast, or want to change to that yet. And nothing wrong with it. I don't see anything wrong with it, but I like a little bit of mystery. There's something about that's okay with me to have a little bit of mystery out there and not know exactly what I'm casting at all the time. But that's just my own feeling on it. And I certainly don't look down on anybody that uses it. It's super cool and fun to fish that way. Now, I've done it myself, but I just haven't put my money there yet. But yeah, it's a phenomenon, that's for sure.
Did you shoot a fixed or an expandable broadhead?
Expandable. I was shooting for a long time Gator XPs. They used to be made by Bass Pro Shops, and they were awesome. I love those things. They had a friction system instead of a rubber band system, so you never had to worry about that rubber band failing on you like you do sometimes on some of the other expandables. But they quit making them, and I still have a few. But since then, I've just gone with Rage. I've kind of switched over to the Rage broadheads, and part of the reason I do shoot expandables is because I had the biggest buck I ever didn't get. I missed because my fixed broadheads planed out, and I didn't realize they were planing out because I hadn't shot them. This is back when I was in, I don't know, it's probably 17, 18 years old. And I had been practicing with field tips, had it dialed. And it was like basically the first week in November, big giant comes in chasing a doe 15 yards, and I shot right over his back. And I was like, this is the biggest buck I've still yet to this day ever probably even seen from a bow stand, let alone had a shot at. This was like an upper 160s to maybe even 170 class buck. He was a giant for this area, and that sucker just didn't even cut a hair on him. And then I went back, and I was almost quit bow hunting. I was so frustrated because the night before I had hit a big 8 high in the back. It was a crazy week, the first night of November, I had a albino 10-pointer chase a doe right under my stand. One of the coolest things I've ever seen. Just a massive, like 150-inch 10 albino, full white, like a freaking mountain goat, right under me. And it was just like one of the coolest things. And the next night, I had a big, old, tall 8 chase a doe right under my stand, and I hit him high. And I was just devastated. Like the biggest buck I'd ever seen in the stand. And hit him high. We looked all night in that pocket, where there's just no man's land, and didn't hit anything vital. And then the next day, I was like, so just like, oh, I guess I'll go out again. And that's when that big one came, just waltzing up to my stand. Like, I still can see it. This was a long time ago, but it's just burned in my brain. And he stopped right in my shooting lane and just right over his back. And then I knew there had to be something wrong. And I ended up going and shooting my broadheads. And at 20 yards, my field tips were hitting 8 inches lower than my broadheads every time. I could have a group here and a group here using the same sight pin. At 20 yards. It's crazy. So then I just was like, screw that. I'm just going to switch to expandables. And then I've never switched back. So hopefully that long story answered your question. What do you shoot?
I shoot some, but I mostly these things. They're fixed blade.
Okay.
But I went to a bigger vein, like 5.2 or something.
Okay.
So it's stable better.
Yep.
Normal blazer veins, I was probably worse than you were saying. Like I was missing a block target at 20.
Okay.
And I would miss it. I would miss high right, and then I would miss left, and then these things, they just go all over. But with these bigger veins, they shoot pretty good, out to probably 50.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's what I had on my arrows were those blazer veins. They were kind of all the rage for a while. Everybody had them. It was the big thing. But
there's a lot of wind resistance, but they don't stabilize the arrow. The other thing is these have a helical on them. I don't know if you can see it, but it twists.
Yep.
So these spin the arrow a little bit, which also stabilizes it more with a fixed blade.
Yep, just like a bullet has rifling, it does the same thing.
Same deal.
That makes sense, yeah.
I just had a good buck finally show up last night and this morning on some cameras, so I've got one loaded. I just need to finish fletching arrows so I can sit in the stand. Yeah,
that's good. My buddy Brett just tagged out last night. He shot a nice 9-pointer.
Cool.
So I knew the last few days would be good with that cold front. I mean, if you were going to shoot an early season buck, the last couple days were the days. Like those were perfect. But it could still happen anytime as long as they're on a feeding pattern and you can get in their way. I've only killed one early season buck with a bow ever. Missed a couple. But yeah, I think only one. And that was that 13-pointer I shot with Jackson in the stand with me 3 years ago on a bean field. Same kind of thing. Super, super high pressure cold front came through in September. And we weren't really even planning on bow hunting, but I was like, we'll go sit in the tower stand and kind of glass the beans and see what comes out. And, maybe something will come by and we can have a good time. And Jackson can come with me. And we got to the field and it was like 3 p.m. and there was already 8 bucks in the field. So we had to like sneak up into the tower and we spooked some of them off. And I was like, oh, this sucks. Well, some of the ones on the north end never spooked. And they made their way all the way down 400 yards, all the way to 40 yards out from that stand. And I smoked that one 13-pointer at 40 yards with the 6-year-old in the stand with me. That was pretty cool. That was like September, I want to say September 19th, I think that was. So really early. He was still kind of, his coat was still real summery, kind of red almost. So just rubbed velvet off probably a week or two before, I'm guessing. But yeah, all my other bucks have been dead nuts in the rut. Just like early November, classic rut hunting.
Most exciting time out in the stand because you never know what's going to run. And that all day action is kind of cool too. You can have one of the nicest bucks I've ever shot ran up to me at like 1:30 in the afternoon or something.
Yep.
And came flying up a ridge and I shot him. I don't remember how far it was, 15 yards maybe. Really close enough that. But yeah, middle of the day, I just got in the stand and came running up. Great big buck.
Yeah, that's the crazy part about that time of year. You don't have to have a big buck on your camera to have a big buck run past your stand in the rut because they can come out of nowhere. And bucks you've never seen before, they'll just appear. And actually, in my experience on the cameras, they appear Halloween almost every year. That last week of October, all of a sudden, bucks that you've never seen just show up. It's early. It's earlier than most people realize. It's usually at night at first that you start seeing them on the cameras, but they just start moving big time that last week of October.
Well, I think that when they're moving a lot and they're establishing scrapes and checking scrapes really hard, it's a great time to shoot them. You know, it's not full peak rut yet. They're not super charged up, but they are moving a lot of mile. And I like hunting on scrape lines because I'm not a very good hunter. Anybody knows what a scrape looks like, so it's a good place for me to sit and run into deer.
Oh, that's a great strategy. I mean, that's where my dad killed his last year. He killed a nice 3.5-year-old 9, and he had literally a scrape like 18 yards directly in front of his stand, and doe came, peed in the scrape. Buck stood right there in the scrape, and he whacked him right there on top of the scrape. I mean, it's just it concentrates the deer. I mean, it makes sense. Like, they're not going to walk 10 feet to the right or left of a good scrape. They're going to go to it and check it if they're there. So it's
especially when you're in big woods like up here, especially in Hayward.
Yep.
That many things to concentrate them down. So
right.
A good line is pretty helpful.
Yep. And that last week of October, that's what they really are doing, is checking scrapes hard. And that's usually where I have my cameras that I end up finding the big ones on, is on scrapes. I used to put them on bait back when we could bait. You usually wouldn't see a ton of big deer during the rut on the bait, but you'd see them on the scrapes.
Right.
You know, that's... What's that?
Or if you did, it was at night.
Or if you did, it was at night. Yep. And a lot of times, those scrape lines, the best activity was right at dawn in the morning for me, at least when I was checking cameras, doing more of that. Very rarely did you see them in the evening. I don't know why. Maybe there's something to it. I'm not sure, but it just seemed like morning was the peak time for scraping.
Yeah.
But I probably, as I just have so much going on this year, I probably won't be bow hunting until the rut anyway. I haven't even thought about it yet. Like, I've got so much to do, plus the 1-year-old, and like, life's just crazy right now. So I'm gonna fish, more this fall than I have, just because I want to keep building the channel and keep kind of working towards that. But I'm gonna have to pass up on some of the hunting I've done in the past, and just kind of just the way it is right now. But kind of a bummer, but just got to roll with it. Yeah, I'll still duck hunt. We duck on an opener. It was pretty slow. We didn't see much for ducks. I mean, the worst numbers we've ever seen. Ooh, look at that.
Like, look at this little pintail.
Little flappy pintail action, huh?
Yeah, Mojo was definitely not quite on the level of a Lucky Duck HD.
No,
As far as,
no. I like the Lucky Ducks myself.
yeah.
You gonna hunt the Mississippi a bit more this year? Or is that your plan?
Yeah. No, I usually hunt mostly on the Mississippi later in the year, and then I'm hoping we'll do the Texas hunt again at some point. So.
Yeah. I think we're gonna goose hunt Saturday. Actually, they just chopped a bunch of corn on the farm that I lease, and there was already a few birds in it on Tuesday. By Saturday, it should be pretty well loaded, I'm guessing.
Awesome.
So that's always fun. Get a couple good goose hunts in every year. Nothing like we used to. I mean, man, we used to run it hard. I mean, we would be scouting every single night, and we would be putting fields to bed, and I mean, we gave her for that whole basically the whole month of September. We were just whacking and stacking geese, but just don't have the time anymore to keep up with all that. Plus, access has gotten a lot harder too. I mean, there's a lot of people that want those geese now.
Really, if you're not here by the 4th of July or whatever it is, all those already take up, and it does get exhausting trying to play that game and the stress of trying to get the field and trying to get there first. And
yep.
Yeah, it is kind of overrated. It's way simpler to be out in the boat.
Yeah. Duck hunting is not so spot specific, and where we duck hunt, most of the spots we duck hunt, you can't get a boat to. We pretty much hunt out of a canoe almost exclusively, and that makes it even less likely that you're going to deal with people. Although we are seeing people here and there, it's just not that many people are willing to drag a canoe a quarter mile through the woods to get to a duck spot. But the ducks know that. I mean, they know where they're getting bothered and where they're not. So that's kind of our strategy: is get out of the way, find those little pockets and stuff back in the woods and back, where you have to canoe or walk a long ways to get to them. And we've had pretty good luck doing that. Some of them are hard to scout though. That's the problem. Like almost impossible. And you just have to like kind of go when you think the ducks are going to be there. And sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. So
hey, you're and that when they're going to go off, but when they're eating acorns, when they're eating wild rice. And
yeah, you kind of learn over the years. You kind of get a feel for what the ducks are going to be doing. It's almost more of a feeling than knowledge. Like you just are like, I just know they're going to be in this spot tomorrow. There's nothing there today, but I just have a feeling they're going to be there tomorrow. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes they do literally show up overnight.
Yeah. Good north wind does a lot of work for you.
Yep. And the one thing we learned is almost for sure, if you get a really cold, completely calm night with a full moon or any kind of light, no wind at all, that's when you're going to see the most movement. Dead calm, bright night, that the birds are going to move. Like we've tried to hunt birds that were in a spot so many times the morning after a night like that, and 90% of the time they're gone the next morning.
Yeah. That's always hard.
Yeah. When you go through all the work and scout and you're like, oh yeah, it looks like a good bunch, we're going to smash them, and then you get there, nothing's in the decoys before light, half an hour goes by and you're like, they ain't coming.
Yep. Well, I appreciate you having me on tonight. I gotta finish rigging some stuff up and getting ready for tomorrow. So
You got a guide trip tomorrow?
tomorrow night, yeah.
Okay.
Day of plumbing and half a day of fishing.
That's not a bad day.
Not a bad day.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Kyle. I got one giveaway to announce here, but you can log off and we'll see you around hopefully next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, man.
All right. You bet. See ya. All right, guys. So, one thing I wanted to mention here, and that is a giveaway. I'm going to be putting it up on the channel, on the YouTube channel, and on Instagram and on Facebook. But I'm teaming up with Virtual Angling, the Virtual Angling app, and we're giving away a free membership. I think I'm going to do this weekend, probably, or possibly the beginning of next week. So stay tuned. Free membership to Virtual Angling app, which I think is like a $70 value. It's a really good value, and they're going to let me give one away. It's basically for a 5,000 subscriber giveaway on my YouTube channel. So thank you guys who are watching on YouTube. It's going to be, I just passed up that 5,000 subscriber mark, so I definitely wanted to do something to kind of give something away to you guys and celebrate that milestone. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up. And yeah, it's been fun having the YouTube going here at the same time. I'm going to definitely dial it in a little bit better, hopefully, and get kind of things set up so it's a little more seamless for both streams to be happening at the same time. But I'm definitely going to keep doing the YouTube stream every week, Thursday, same time. And it's going to be really good once we get to the ice season here. You guys are going to be getting a lot of good information on these lives. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and good luck, tight lines. We'll see you hopefully next week. You'll show up and we can talk fishing again. And I'm also happy to talk hunting here and there too. I don't mind talking a little bow hunting, a little duck hunting. That's always been a passion of mine too. So thanks again, guys. Good to see you all, and we'll see you next week.